I'm pregnant, she whispered, and in that moment, everything Mark thought he had under control started to fall apart. He froze in the doorway, one hand still gripping his office
Who are
bag,
you? What do you
the
want?
other hovering midair like he had
I'm not here
forgotten
for
what he
you.
was about to do.
Then
The
why are you
fluorescent
here?
lights in the hallway
That's between
buzzed
her and
faintly
me.
above him, but all he could
I don't
hear
know
was
you.
his own heartbeat pounding louder than it should. This wasn't how late nights at the office were supposed to end. This wasn't how his carefully rebuilt life was supposed to get shaken again. Mark had spent the last 3 years doing everything right. At least that is what he told himself. Wake up at 6, make breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter Lily, drop her off at school, work 10 hours straight, pick her up, dinner, homework, bedtime stories, repeat. No chaos, no surprises, no risks, especially not anything that could hurt Lily. He had made that promise the day her mom left. And yet here he was, standing in front of the one person who could unravel all of it without even raising her voice. Claire Donovan, his boss, arms crossed tightly like she was holding herself together, her eyes locked on his with a mix of fear and something else he couldn't quite read. Regret, maybe, or expectation. Say something, she said, quieter now, but sharper. Mark swallowed hard, his mind scrambling to catch up. Just one night. That was all it had been. One late project deadline. One shared bottle of wine in the conference room after everyone else had gone home. One moment where exhaustion blurred into something personal, something he had no business letting happen. He had told himself it was a mistake the second he walked out of that building the next morning. He had buried it, ignored it, moved on like it never existed. Because he didn't have room in his life for complications. Because Lily came first. Always. Are you sure? He finally managed, his voice lower than usual, almost unrecognizable. Claire let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without any humor. I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Mark's thoughts jumped instantly to Lily, to her small hands holding his, to the way she looked at him like he had all the answers. What was he supposed to tell her if this was real? What was he supposed to do? Claire took a step closer, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. I'm not asking you for anything, she said, but her voice betrayed her. There was something there, something heavy. I just thought you should know. That made it worse somehow. If she had demanded something, blamed him, given him a clear role to play, it would have been easier. But this uncertainty, this open-ended reality, it was the kind of thing that didn't fit into his neatly structured world. Mark ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly as he tried to steady himself. When did you find out? He asked. Yesterday morning, she replied. And I've been trying to figure out how to tell you since. He nodded, though nothing felt settled. Nothing felt clear. The hallway suddenly felt too small, the air too tight. He glanced toward the exit, as if part of him wanted to walk away and pretend none of this had happened. But he couldn't. Not this time. Claire's eyes softened for a brief second before she looked away. There's something else, she said quietly. Mark's stomach dropped before she even finished the sentence. What do you mean, something else? He asked, his voice tightening. Claire hesitated, just long enough to make his chest tense. Then she looked back at him and said, It's not just about the baby, it's about what's going to happen to you when people find out. Mark felt the weight of her words hit harder than the confession itself, like the ground beneath him had shifted again before he could even find his balance. What do you mean, what is going to happen to me? He asked, his voice sharper now, edged with a kind of fear he had not felt in years. Claire did not answer immediately, and that silence said more than anything else could. She glanced down the hallway, as if the empty office around them suddenly felt less private, then back at him with a look that made his stomach tighten. Think about it, Mark, she said quietly. You are my direct report. You work under me. If this gets out, it is not just personal anymore. It becomes something else. He shook his head, already feeling the pressure building behind his eyes. We did not do anything wrong, he said, though even as the words left his mouth, they sounded weaker than he wanted them to be. It was one night. We are both adults. Claire gave a small, tired smile that did not reach her eyes. That is not how people see things like this. Not in this company. Not in this position. Mark let out a slow breath, trying to process it all at once. His job, his stability, everything he had worked to rebuild after his life fell apart the first time. He could not lose this. Not now. Not when Lily was finally happy again. when she had finally stopped asking why her mom never came back. "So what are you saying?" he asked, his voice dropping. "That I am going to get fired?" Claire looked at him, and for the first time, there was something vulnerable in her expression. "I am saying this could get complicated very fast," she replied. "Human resources, company policy, conflict of interest, it will not stay quiet forever." Mark rubbed his face, frustration rising now, mixing with something deeper, something closer to panic. "Then why tell me like this?" he asked. "Why not figure it out first before dropping this on me?" Claire's eyes flashed, just for a second. "Because it is your child, too," she said, her voice firmer now. "And whether you like it or not, you are part of this." That hit him harder than anything else. "Your child, too." The words echoed in his mind, louder than everything else. He had not even let himself think about it that way yet. Not fully, because thinking about it made it real. And if it was real, then everything had to change. Mark leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling for a moment like he was searching for something solid to hold on to. "I have a daughter," he said quietly, almost to himself. "She depends on me for everything. I cannot just let my life fall apart again." Claire softened slightly at that, her shoulders lowering just a bit. "I know," she said. "I am not trying to destroy your life, Mark. I am trying to be honest before things get worse." He looked back at her, searching her face for something certain, something that made sense. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Claire hesitated again, and that hesitation told him she did not have a clear answer either. "I do not know yet," she admitted. "I have been going back and forth all day. About the baby, about work, about everything." Another silence settled between them, heavier this time, filled with too many unknowns. Mark's phone buzzed suddenly in his pocket, cutting through the tension like a sharp break in the moment. He pulled it out instinctively, his chest tightening when he saw the name on the screen. "Lily." He answered immediately. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, forcing his voice to steady. "Daddy, are you still at work?" she asked, her small voice soft but expectant. He closed his eyes for a brief second. "Yeah, just finishing up. I will be there soon, okay?" There was a pause on the other end. Then she said something that made his heart drop. "You said that an hour ago." Mark glanced at Claire, then back at the empty hallway, feeling the walls close in again. "I know, I am sorry. I am leaving now." He hung up slowly, guilt washing over him, sharp and immediate. Claire watched him, her expression unreadable. "You should go," she said quietly. Mark nodded, but his feet did not move right away. Everything felt suspended, like one wrong step would set something off he could not stop. "We are not done with this," Claire added, her voice steady now. He looked at her one last time, then turned toward the exit. "No," he said under his breath. "We are definitely not." He pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air, but before he could even take a full breath, his phone buzzed again in his hand, this time with a message from an unknown number, and as he unlocked the screen, his heart skipped when he read the first line. "We need to talk about Claire." Mark stood frozen on the sidewalk, the glow from the streetlight flickering above him as the message burned into his eyes again and again. "We need to talk about Claire." No name, no context, just that one sentence that felt like it carried more weight than it should. His first instinct was to ignore it, to shove the phone back into his pocket and get into his car, drive home, pick up Lily, and pretend none of this existed for a few more hours. But something about it did not feel random. It felt targeted, intentional, like whoever sent it already knew enough to be dangerous. He looked back at the office building, its glass windows reflecting nothing but darkness now. And for a brief second, he wondered if Claire had anything to do with it. If this was part of the complicated she had warned him about. But that did not make sense. Not yet. His phone buzzed again, a second message lighting up the screen before he could decide what to do. "You should not trust her." Mark's jaw tightened instantly. "What is that supposed to mean?" he muttered under his breath, though there was no one around to hear him. His mind started racing, piecing together every interaction he had ever had with Claire, every meeting, every late night, every subtle moment he might have ignored. She had always been composed, controlled, the kind of boss who never let emotions interfere with decisions. And yet tonight she had looked shaken, uncertain, almost vulnerable. Was that real, or was it something else entirely? Mark typed back before he could stop himself. "Who is this?" The response came almost immediately, like the sender had been waiting. "Someone who knows what you are walking into." His chest tightened again, a slow unease creeping in deeper now. This was not a prank. This was not random. This was someone watching, someone aware. He glanced around the empty parking lot, suddenly hyper-aware of how alone he was, how exposed everything felt. "This is ridiculous," he whispered, trying to ground himself. "You are overthinking." But he knew he was not, because too many things had already happened tonight that he could not explain. Another message appeared. "Meet me. 10 minutes. Coffee shop across the street." Mark looked up instinctively, his eyes landing on the small diner on the corner, its neon sign flickering softly in the night. It was still open, a few silhouettes visible through the window. His first instinct was to walk away, to ignore this completely, because getting involved with something unknown, something potentially messy, was the exact opposite of the life he had built. But then Lily's voice echoed in his mind again. "You said that an hour ago," and the guilt twisted sharply in his chest. He was already late, already failing to keep things simple, stable, safe. And yet if this message was real, if there was something about Claire he did not know, something that could affect his job, his future, his ability to take care of Lily, then walking away might be worse. He exhaled slowly, making a decision he was not entirely comfortable with. 5 minutes, he said quietly to himself. In and out. He crossed the street, the sound of his footsteps echoing faintly as he pushed open the diner door, a soft bell chiming above him. The smell of coffee and warm food hit him immediately, grounding and familiar, but it did nothing to calm the tension coiled inside him. He scanned the room quickly. A couple sat in the corner, an older man read a newspaper by the window, and then there was one person sitting alone in a booth near the back, facing him, already watching him like they knew exactly who he was. Mark slowed slightly, his instincts telling him to turn around, but it was too late. The person raised a hand, signaling him over. He hesitated for just a second, then walked forward, each step heavier than the last. As he reached the table, the stranger leaned in slightly, their voice low but clear. "You really have no idea who Claire Donovan is, do you?" Mark's heart skipped, his breath catching as the question landed, and in that moment he realized this was not just about a mistake anymore. This was something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Mark pulled out the chair slowly and sat down, his eyes locked on the stranger as his mind raced to make sense of what was happening. The man across from him looked to be in his early 40s, clean-cut, calm in a way that felt deliberate, like he had done this before. There was no hesitation in his posture, no uncertainty in his gaze. That alone made Mark uneasy. "I asked you a question," the man said, folding his hands on the table. "Do you know who she really is?" Mark frowned, his patience already thinning. "She is my boss," he replied firmly. "And right now, that is already more than enough of a problem." The man gave a small nod, like he expected that answer. "That is what you think," he said. "But Claire Donovan is not just another executive in that company." Mark leaned back slightly, crossing his arms. "Then what is this? Some kind of warning? Blackmail?" he asked. "Because I am not interested." The man's expression did not change. "If this were blackmail, I would have asked you for something already," he said calmly. "I am trying to keep you from walking into something you do not understand." Mark let out a quiet scoff, but it came out weaker than he intended. "Then start explaining," he said. The man studied him for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal, then leaned in slightly. "Claire has a pattern," he said. "She gets close to people she works with. Not often, not carelessly, but when she does, it is never simple." Mark's stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means," the man continued, "you are not the first person who thought it was just one night." The words hit harder than Mark expected. A flicker of anger rose immediately. "You do not know anything about what happened," he said, his voice sharper now. The man did not react. "I know enough," he replied. "Enough to recognize the situation you are in." Mark shook his head, pushing back. "No," he said. "You are making assumptions. You do not know her like I do." The moment the words left his mouth, he realized how weak they sounded. Because the truth was, he did not know her. Not really. Not beyond the professional, controlled version she showed at work, and the one brief moment where everything blurred. The man seemed to notice that hesitation. "Exactly," he said quietly. "You do not know her." A silence settled between them, heavier now. Mark glanced down at the table, his thoughts spinning faster. "So what are you saying?" he asked. "That she planned this?" The man shook his head slowly. I am saying you need to ask yourself why everything is happening so fast, he replied. Why tonight? Why now? Why you? Mark felt a chill run through him. Because he had been asking himself the same questions, even if he had not admitted it out loud. This is not making any sense, Mark said, his voice lower now. Then let me make it simple, the man said. He reached into his jacket and placed a small envelope on the table, sliding it toward Mark. Look at that. Mark hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to walk away, but his curiosity, his need for answers, pushed him forward. He picked up the envelope slowly, opening it just enough to see what was inside. His breath caught instantly. Photos. Printed, clear, undeniable. Claire, in different settings, different times, with different men. All of them looked familiar in one way or another, like co-workers, people from the same company. Mark's chest tightened as he flipped through them quickly, his hands starting to shake slightly. What is this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A pattern, the man repeated. And you are the next part of it. Mark looked up sharply, his mind rejecting what he was seeing. No, he said. This could be anything. Old photos. Misleading angles. You cannot just. One of them lost his job within a month, the man interrupted calmly. Another transferred out of state. And one disappeared from the company entirely. Mark froze. What do you mean, disappeared? He asked. The man held his gaze. No record. No exit announcement. Just gone. The diner suddenly felt colder, the noise around them fading into the background. Mark's heart pounded harder now, each beat louder than the last. Why are you telling me this? He asked. The man leaned back slightly, studying him again. Because tonight is not the beginning of your problem, he said quietly. It is the moment you finally got pulled into hers. Mark stared at him, the weight of everything crashing down at once. And then the man added one more sentence that made his blood run cold. And if she told you she is pregnant, you should be asking whether that is even true. Mark's fingers tightened around the photos, the edges pressing into his skin as if he needed the physical sensation to stay grounded. That is not possible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction now. His eyes dropped back to the images, scanning them again, slower this time, noticing details he had missed at first glance. Office backgrounds, company events, familiar faces in unfamiliar situations. Each one looked like a version of him, caught in a moment that was never meant to matter, but somehow did. You are telling me she did this on purpose? Mark asked, his voice lower, more controlled, but filled with tension. The man shook his head slightly. I am telling you there is a pattern, he repeated. What you choose to believe about it is up to you. Mark exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair as frustration and doubt collided inside him. No, he said. This does not add up. If this was real, someone would have said something. Human resources, leadership, someone would have noticed. The man leaned forward just enough to keep Mark's attention locked. People notice, he said. They just do not connect the dots. Not until it is too late. Mark felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Too late. The phrase echoed louder than it should. His mind jumped back to Claire standing in that hallway. Her voice steady, but her eyes uncertain. The way she had said, I am not asking you for anything. That had felt honest. Real. But now, sitting here, looking at these photos, hearing this stranger speak with such certainty, that moment started to blur. Why me? Mark asked quietly, more to himself than to the man. I keep my head down. I do my job. I go home. I do not get involved in anything. The man watched him carefully. Exactly, he said. You are stable. Predictable. Reliable. That makes you useful. Mark looked up sharply. Useful for what? He asked. The man paused, as if weighing how far to push. That is the part you need to figure out before it is too late, he replied. Mark's patience snapped slightly. You keep saying that, he said. Too late for what? The man did not answer directly. Instead, he nodded toward the envelope still in Mark's hand. Look at the dates on the back of the photos, he said. Mark hesitated, then flipped one over. His stomach dropped instantly. Dates. All spaced out. Months apart. Sometimes a year. But there was something else. Each one aligned with something specific. Promotions. Department shifts. Internal restructures. Mark's mind started connecting dots before he could stop it. These all happened right before major changes in the company, he said slowly. The man nodded once. Now you are starting to see it. Mark's pulse quickened. You are saying she is using people to move up, he asked. I am saying, the man replied calmly. that every time she gets close to someone, something changes in her favor. Mark felt his chest tighten again, but this time it was not just fear. It was confusion, disbelief, and something else creeping in beneath it. Doubt. Because part of him still remembered the way Claire had looked. Tonight. That had not felt calculated. That had not felt like a strategy. And the pregnancy? Mark asked, his voice barely steady now. That does not fit your pattern. The man's expression shifted slightly, just enough to make Mark uneasy again. No, he said. That is new. Silence hit hard after that. Mark stared at him, trying to read between the lines. What does that mean? He pressed. The man leaned back, exhaling slowly. It means either she changed her approach, he said, or this situation is different from the others. Mark's grip tightened again. Different how? He asked. The man's eyes held his, steady and unflinching. Different in a way that could hurt you more than anyone before. Mark felt a sharp knot form in his stomach. You are not making this any clearer, he said. The man glanced toward the window briefly, then back at him. Because I do not have all the answers, he admitted. But I know enough to tell you this is not something you can ignore. Mark looked down at the photos again, then slowly slid them back into the envelope, his mind spinning faster than he could control. He thought about Lily waiting at home, about the promise he made to keep her life stable, safe, untouched by chaos. And now everything felt like it was slipping through his fingers again. If you were in my position, Mark said quietly, what would you do? The man did not hesitate. I would stop assuming she is telling you the whole truth, he said. Mark nodded slowly, the weight of that advice settling heavily on him. He stood up, grabbing the envelope, his decision not fully formed but already moving him forward. I need to go, he said. The man did not stop him. You are already in this, Mark, he added calmly. Mark paused for just a second, then turned and walked toward the door, the bell chiming again as he stepped out into the night. His mind was racing, his chest tight, his thoughts tangled between what he had seen and what he had felt. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Claire's name, debating whether to call her, confront her, demand answers. But before he could decide, his phone lit up again. This time, it was not a message. It was Claire calling him. And as he stared at her name on the screen, his heart pounded harder than ever, because for the first time, he did not know if answering would bring clarity or make everything worse. Mark stared at the phone for a fraction of a second longer, then answered, his voice steady but guarded. Hello. There was a pause on the other end, just long enough to make his chest tighten again. And then Claire spoke, her voice quieter than before, but sharper, more urgent. Where are you? She asked. Mark glanced back at the diner behind him, then out at the empty street. I just left the office, he replied. Why? Another pause. This one heavier. Did anyone talk to you? She asked. The question hit him instantly, cutting through everything else. Mark's grip on the phone tightened slightly. What do you mean? He asked, careful now. Claire exhaled slowly, like she was trying to keep control of something slipping. Mark, I need you to be honest with me, she said. Did someone approach you tonight? His mind flashed back to the man in the booth, the envelope, the photos. For a split second, he considered denying it, keeping control of the situation, but something in her tone made that difficult. Why are you asking me that? He said instead. Claire did not answer directly. Because if they did, then things are already moving faster than I expected, she said, her voice tightening. Mark felt that same phrase echo again in his head. Faster than expected. Who is they? He pressed. Silence. Then, quietly, people who should not be involved in this. Mark's jaw clenched. That does not answer my question, he said. And neither did you. Claire shot back, her voice firmer now. The tension between them shifted, sharper, more direct. Mark exhaled, looking down at the envelope still in his hand. Yeah, he admitted finally. Someone talked to me. The line went completely silent. No breathing. No movement. Just silence. Then Claire spoke again, and this time her voice had changed. Not just worried. Afraid. What did they tell you? She asked. Mark hesitated, weighing his words carefully. They told me I do not know who you really are, he said. Another silence, but this one felt different. Heavier. Like something had just been confirmed. And do you believe them? Claire asked. Mark looked up at the dark sky, his thoughts tangled between everything he had seen and everything he had felt. I do not know what to believe right now, he admitted. Claire let out a slow breath. Then listen to me, she said, her voice dropping lower. Whatever they showed you, whatever they said, it is not the full story. Mark let out a quiet, frustrated laugh. That is exactly what they said about you, he replied. That I am not getting the full picture. Because you are not, Claire said quickly. Mark, I need you to trust me on this. The word trust hit him harder than anything else. Trust you, he repeated. After tonight? After everything you just told me? Claire's voice softened slightly, but there was urgency beneath it. I told you the truth, she said. At least the part that matters right now. Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. The part that matters? He echoed. So there is more. Claire hesitated, and that hesitation was all the answer he needed. Claire, he said slowly, what are you not telling me? The silence stretched longer this time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. I did not plan for this to happen with you, she said. Mark felt something twist in his chest. That is not an answer, he said. It is the truth, she replied. You were not supposed to be part of any of this. His pulse spiked. Any of what? He asked, his voice sharper now. Claire's breathing was slightly uneven now, like she was standing on the edge of something she had been trying to keep contained. There are things happening inside the company, she said carefully. Things that go beyond promotions or office politics. Mark's grip tightened again. Then explain it to me, he demanded. Claire did not respond immediately, and when she finally did, her voice dropped even lower. Not over the phone, she said. We need to talk in person. Mark hesitated, every instinct pulling him in different directions. The stranger's warning. The photos. The pattern. And now this. Why should I believe you, he asked. Claire's answer came instantly this time. Because if you do not, she said, you are going to walk straight into something that could cost you everything. Mark's chest tightened again, his mind racing faster than ever. Where? He asked finally. Claire did not hesitate. My place, she said. Mark froze for a split second. That is not a good idea, he said. It is the only safe place right now, she replied. Mark looked down at the envelope again, then back at the empty street, his thoughts colliding. Nothing about this felt safe anymore. Not the office. Not Claire. Not the stranger. You have 30 minutes, Claire added. After that, I cannot guarantee anything. The line went quiet. Mark stood there, the phone still pressed to his ear, his heart pounding harder with every second. And then, slowly, he pulled the phone away, staring at the screen as the call ended, because for the first time since this started, he realized something far worse than confusion or doubt. He was already out of time. Mark did not remember getting into his car, but suddenly he was there, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, engine running, the clock on the dashboard reminding him he was already late. Too late, not just for Lily, but for everything. 30 minutes. That was all Claire had given him. 30 minutes to choose a direction that could change everything. He exhaled sharply, trying to think clearly, but his mind refused to slow down. The stranger's voice echoed in his head. You are already in this. Claire's voice followed right after. You are going to walk straight into something that could cost you everything. And then Lily's voice, soft but disappointed. You said that an hour ago. That was the one that hit the hardest. Mark closed his eyes for a brief second, then grabbed his phone and dialed quickly. Hey, Mrs. Carter, it is Mark, he said when the line picked up. I am really sorry, I am running behind. Can Lily stay a little longer tonight? There was a short pause. Then the older woman's warm voice came through. Of course, honey. She is fine. But she has been asking about you. Mark swallowed, guilt tightening his chest. I will be there as soon as I can, he said. I promise. He hung up, staring at the phone for a second longer before setting it down. That bought him time, but not peace. Nothing about this felt under control anymore. He started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, his decision not fully formed but already moving him forward. The road ahead stretched into the quiet night, streetlights passing in a steady rhythm. But his thoughts were anything but steady. Every mile felt heavier. Every second felt like it was counting down to something he could not see yet. He replayed the photos in his mind, the dates, the pattern, the way everything seemed to align too perfectly to be coincidence. Then he thought about Claire again, her face in that hallway, the tension in her voice, the way she had asked if anyone had talked to him before he even mentioned it. That meant she knew, or at least suspected, which meant this was bigger than just rumors or office gossip. This was something active, something moving in real time. His grip tightened on the wheel. What are you involved in, Claire? He muttered under his breath. The GPS on his dashboard blinked as he entered her address, the route calculating instantly. 15 minutes. That was all it would take to get there. 15 minutes to step deeper into something he did not understand. Or 15 minutes to turn around and walk away from all of it. But he already knew that was not an option anymore. Not after the call. Not after the message. Not after what he had seen. As he turned onto a quieter residential street, his phone buzzed again, vibrating against the console. His heart skipped as he glanced down, expecting another unknown number, another warning, but this time it was something else. A notification from his email. Work email. Mark frowned slightly, then tapped it open at the next red light. His eyes scanned the subject line, and his chest tightened instantly. Urgent. Internal review notice. His thumb moved quickly, opening the message. The words blurred for a second before snapping into focus. Effective immediately, you are being placed under review pending investigation into a violation of company conduct policy. Mark's breath caught. His pulse spiked. He read it again, slower this time, each word hitting harder than the last. This was not a warning. This was already happening. He had not even had time to process what was going on, and it was already unfolding without him. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as the light turned green, cars behind him honking faintly as he sat there a second too long. He pressed the gas, moving forward, but his mind was racing faster than the car itself. This was exactly what the stranger had said. Things were already in motion. Too late. The word echoed again, louder now. He turned onto Claire's street, the houses larger, quieter, the kind of place where everything looked calm on the surface. He slowed as he approached the address, his headlights sweeping across the front of her house. And then he saw it. A car already parked in her driveway. Not just any car. A dark sedan, engine still running, headlights off. Mark's chest tightened instantly. He pulled over across the street, his eyes locked on the house, his instincts screaming louder than ever now. He was not the only one who had been told to come here tonight. And as he sat there, watching the shadow move behind Claire's front window, one thought hit him harder than anything else. He might already be too late. Mark stayed in the car for 3 seconds, maybe 4, but it felt longer, like time itself was stretching just to give him one last chance to walk away. The engine idled quietly beneath him, the dashboard clock ticking forward, each second louder than it should have been. That car in Claire's driveway was not supposed to be there. Not tonight. Not when she had told him he had 30 minutes. His eyes stayed locked on the house, watching the faint movement behind the curtains, shadows shifting in ways that made his chest tighten. Someone was already inside with her. The question was who? His mind immediately went back to the stranger in the diner. Was it him? Had he gotten here first? Or worse, was it someone else entirely? Someone Claire had been afraid of when she asked if anyone had approached him? Mark exhaled slowly, his instincts fighting each other. One side told him to leave, to get back in the car, pick up Lily, and protect the one thing in his life that actually mattered. The other side told him that if he left now, he would never understand what was happening, and whatever this was would follow him anyway. He grabbed the envelope from the passenger seat, feeling its weight again, heavier now with everything he knew. You are already in this, he muttered, repeating the stranger's words. That was the truth he could not escape. Slowly, he turned off the engine. The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air, hitting his face, grounding but not calming. Each step toward the house felt deliberate, like he was crossing a line he could not uncross. As he approached the driveway, he glanced at the dark sedan again, trying to see inside, but the windows were tinted, revealing nothing. No movement, no sound, just presence. He reached the front door and hesitated for a fraction of a second, his hand hovering just before knocking. Then, before he could second-guess himself, the door opened. Claire stood there, her expression tense, eyes scanning him quickly like she was checking for something. Relief flickered across her face for a brief second, then disappeared just as fast. You made it, she said quietly. Mark stepped inside without responding, his eyes immediately shifting past her, scanning the room. The house was dimly lit, clean, controlled, just like her office presence, but the air felt different. Tighter. Charged. Who else is here? He asked, his voice low but direct. Claire closed the door behind him, her hand lingering on the handle for a second longer than necessary. You saw the car, she said. It was not a question. Mark turned to face her fully. Answer me, he said. Claire hesitated, and that hesitation was enough to spike his pulse again. Someone who is part of this, she replied carefully. Part of what? Mark pressed, frustration rising again. Before Claire could answer, a voice came from deeper inside the house. He deserves to know, Claire. Mark froze instantly. That voice. Familiar. Too familiar. His eyes narrowed as he turned toward the sound. Footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, and then the man from the diner stepped into view. Mark's breath caught, his mind trying to catch up. You, he said, disbelief mixing with anger. You followed me. The man shook his head slightly. No, he said calmly. I was already here. Mark looked between the two of them, his confusion deepening into something sharper. What is this? He demanded. Are you working together? Claire stepped forward slightly, her voice quick but controlled. No, she said. Not like that. Mark let out a short, frustrated laugh. That is not an answer, he said. Nothing either of you says is a clear answer. The tension in the room thickened, pressing in from all sides. The man in the diner crossed his arms, watching Mark closely. You came here for the truth, he said. So listen carefully. Mark's jaw tightened. I am listening, he replied. The man glanced briefly at Claire, then back at Mark. She is not lying about everything, he said. But she is not telling you why this keeps happening. Mark's eyes shifted back to Claire, searching her face. Why? He asked. Claire's composure cracked for the first time, just slightly, but enough for him to see it. Fear. Real fear. Because I did not think it would happen again, she said quietly. Mark felt his chest tighten. Again, he repeated. Claire nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper now. Every time I try to walk away from it, it follows me, she said. The promotions, the relationships, the rumors, it is not random. Mark's pulse pounded louder. Then what is it? He demanded. Claire looked at him, her eyes filled with something he had not seen before. Not control, not calculation, something closer to desperation. It is a setup, she said. The word hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Mark frowned, his mind struggling to process it. A setup by who? He asked. Claire hesitated, her gaze shifting briefly toward the man, then back to Mark. And then she said the one thing that made everything stop. By the same people who just put you under investigation. Mark's breath caught, his mind snapping back to the email, the timing, the pattern, everything aligning in a way that felt too precise to be coincidence. He took a slow step back, his voice quieter now, but filled with tension. So you are saying this was never about you and me? He said. Claire shook her head slightly. No, she replied. It was about finding someone they could use next. Mark's chest tightened, the realization hitting him all at once. And that someone is me, he said. Claire did not respond. She did not need to. The silence confirmed it. And then the man from the diner added one final piece that made the situation even worse. Not just you, he said calmly. Mark looked at him, confusion flickering again. What do you mean? He asked. The man held his gaze, steady and unflinching. They already know about your daughter. Mark felt the world narrow down to a single point as those words landed. They already know about your daughter, and everything else, the office, the investigation, the photos. Even Claire suddenly shifted into a different kind of threat, something more personal, something that crossed a line he had sworn no one would ever cross again. No, he said immediately, his voice low but firm, shaking his head like he could reject the idea just by saying it out loud. No, they do not get to involve her. Claire stepped closer, her expression soft but urgent. Mark, listen to me, she said. They are not after Lily. They are using what matters to you to control the situation. That is the same thing. Mark snapped, his voice rising slightly before he forced it back down. His chest tightened as his thoughts raced, every instinct now focused on one thing, protecting Lily. Who are they? He demanded again, louder this time, the question cutting through the tension in the room. The man from the diner exchanged a glance with Claire before answering. People inside your company who do not operate by the rules you think exist, he said. People who benefit from moving the right individuals into the right positions, no matter the cost. Mark frowned, trying to process it. That sounds like conspiracy talk, he said. But even as he said it, the email, the timing, the pattern, all of it lined up too cleanly to ignore. Claire shook her head. It is not a conspiracy when it is already happening to you, she said quietly. Mark paced once across the room, then back, his mind trying to find something solid to hold on to. So what, he said. They set this up, they create situations, they push people out or move them around, and somehow I got pulled into it. The man nodded once. Yes, he said, and now they are watching how you respond. Mark stopped moving. Watching, he repeated. Claire's voice softened again. Everything you do next matters, she said. If you panic, if you confront the wrong person, if you try to fight this the wrong way, it plays directly into what they want. Mark let out a slow breath, forcing himself to think, really think, for the first time since this started. Not react. Not fear. Think. He looked at Claire, really looked at her, beyond the position, beyond the situation, and for the first time, he saw something real. Not control. Not manipulation. Someone who had been dealing with this longer than he had. Someone who had tried to navigate it, and failed more than once. The pregnancy, he said slowly. Is it real? The room went quiet. Claire held his gaze, and this time she did not hesitate. Yes, she said. Mark felt that answer settle in differently than everything else. Not like a threat. Not like a strategy. Something human. Something complicated, but real. He nodded once, slowly, accepting that peace even if nothing else made sense yet. Then this is not just about me anymore, he said. Claire's eyes softened slightly. It never was, she replied. Mark exhaled, the tension in his shoulders shifting into something more focused. Okay, he said. Then we stop reacting and start controlling what we can. The man raised an eyebrow slightly. And what exactly can you control right now? Mark looked at him, then at Claire, then back again. What they think I will do, he said. Silence followed, but it was different now, less chaotic, more grounded. They expect me to panic, Mark continued. To make a mistake. To either run or fight in a way that exposes me. Claire nodded slowly. That is how they have handled everyone else, she said. Mark took a breath, steadying himself. Then I do the opposite, he said. I stay exactly who I have been. I go to work. I cooperate with the investigation. I give them nothing they can twist. The man watched him carefully, then gave a small nod. That buys you time, he said. Time to understand who is behind this. Mark nodded once. And in the meantime, he added, his voice firmer now, I keep my personal life exactly where it belongs. Protected. Claire's expression shifted, a mix of relief and something deeper. You are not running, she said quietly. Mark shook his head. I have something worth staying for, he replied. The weight of Lily's presence in his life anchored him in that moment more than anything else could. This was not just about surviving a situation. It was about choosing what kind of person he was going to be in it. The man leaned back slightly, studying him one last time. Most people do not make that choice when it gets this complicated, he said. Mark gave a small, steady exhale. Most people are not raising a kid who is watching everything they do, he replied. The room settled into a quiet understanding, the chaos of the night shifting into something clearer, not resolved, but defined. There were still unknowns, still risks, but now there was direction. Claire stepped closer, her voice softer now. We will figure this out, she said. Mark nodded once, meeting her gaze. We will, he agreed. And for the first time since she whispered those words in the hallway, the situation did not feel like something that was happening to him. It felt like something he could face. Because sometimes the moment that breaks your life is the same moment that forces you to decide who you really are, and the real question is not what happens next, but who you choose to become when it does.